So while we're waiting for people to log in, just a few housekeeping chores to keep in mind. The presentation will be about 45 minutes with 15 minutes for question and answer period. Any questions that you have can be entered into the Q&A box that you should be able to see somewhere on your screen. For me, it's at the bottom of my screen. Perhaps on your screen, it's somewhere else, but look for the Q&A box. If you want to engage in chat while we're waiting, you could certainly sign in, identify yourself, and send a hello message to people telling us where you're from. Or you can send comments throughout the presentation. So I'll be looking at that as Tracy is giving her presentation. So let's get started. First of all, my name is Elizabeth Ziemba. I'm the president of Medical Tourism Training, and it is my pleasure to welcome you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be, to this webinar focusing on the topic of travel insurance and medical tourism. This is an area where there's quite a bit of confusion. There are established and new products coming online that could be very beneficial for your clients. And hopefully, I'm sure Tracy will do an excellent job of squelching any kind of confusion that's out there as to what do advisors suggest to their clients, whether you work for hospitals and international patient departments, if you're facilitators, or if you're someone considering traveling for healthcare outside your usual place of receiving that care. What do you select? What are the options that are right for you for your particular situation? So it's my pleasure to be here today with Tracy Simmons, that's with one M. And I've known Tracy for a number of years because she is an experienced insurance individual who has worked in medical tourism for a number of years. I've lost count. We can't remember how many years we've known each other. But a little bit of background about Tracy. She is the president of Custom Assurance Placements, which is an innovator of cutting-edge insurance solutions designed specifically for medical tourists. She has a deep understanding of the complexities involved in seeking healthcare abroad. She has pioneered the creation of global protective solutions, we call it GPS, which are products that offer comprehensive coverage for individuals undergoing medical treatments in foreign countries. So she's going to talk today about different features of these products, how to mitigate liability, how to reduce receivables, increase patient flow, and hopefully answer any and all of the questions that you have about this topic. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Tracy.
Hi, so nice to meet everybody. I see some great familiar faces in the attendees, and so glad to see them. Thanks for the support. I guess I'll just go ahead and get started with the PowerPoint presentation. So I'm going to share my screen. Bear with me. I know insurance, but I'm not a technical guru, so we'll see if we can get this going properly. Is that showing? Oh, no, there we go. Hopefully that's showing up now.
There we go. It's good.
Great. As Elizabeth said, my name's Tracy Simmons. I'm the president of Custom Assurance Placements. We're a specialty insurance broker. We work with multiple international and domestic insurance companies and develop customized, whoops, look what I've done already. See? Okay, let's get back here. Customized solutions for industries, special industries. It was probably 12 or 13 years ago we developed the product for medical tourism insurance. So the question that is brought us to this topic today is, what if something goes wrong? Medical tourism complications are not always the result of an error. They can happen at home or abroad, but the standard of care for medical tourism is a little bit higher for many reasons. And as Elizabeth will attest to, it's very important in this industry to elevate that standard of care, to keep this industry thriving and its reputation at the top level. So I lost my place. Okay, the standard. Most patients are already nervous to travel. They have the fear factor of, I'm having surgery, but then the travel adds another level of fear to somebody undergoing a procedure. The fear factor is not only the patient, but the family members of the patient, the facilitators, the employers, and other stakeholders. Being prepared is the best way to avoid potential issues in the case of an accident or illness or complication of a patient, because this can save you money. It can save the patient money. It can save the family money. It can save the provider money, not to mention the potential liability associated with sending a patient abroad. Employer liability, facilitator liability is going to be one of the topics we talk about today. Money is also not the only thing you can lose. There's a reputational risk involved in medical tourism, and that can affect the industry as a whole, but can affect you personally if you're a facilitator, and especially if you are a provider. Every challenge has an opportunity to excel. So I'm sure you have read and seen some of the negative media in medical tourism. There's been some negative press in Turkey lately. I know there was some medical tourists that were killed in Mexico, little questionable circumstances. And Ireland's been doing some promotion about the pitfalls of medical tourism. You know, it's my job to do a little scare tactic at first. And I just wanted to bring to the forefront the things that we're hearing and seeing so that you can understand that there are ways to mitigate that. Also know local doctors are not always on board with sending a patient abroad, and they can further exacerbate the fear factors and bad press. So there's a continuity of care issue involved when treating a patient as well. Another cost could be time. Time is an asset that we spend on solving potential problems with no revenue. Leaving this to experts and claims providers can really help elevate the standard of care in medical tourism. The most important thing you can do is set expectations of the patient and discuss the concerns. By setting these expectations ahead of time and discussing solutions, the patient understands what to do, and it solves the question that they are most definitely asking themselves: what if something goes wrong? We have to work fast and quickly to remedy situations and correct mistakes, and risk management solutions often involve a transfer of risk that takes that burden off of you and puts it onto an insurer and an assistance service. So having a plan for problems can elevate your patient satisfaction. If you think people aren't thinking about that question, then you may be ignoring the elephant in the room. One of the reasons that we developed this product 13 years ago was at the request of Blue Cross Blue Shield. They entered into the medical tourism arena and developed a global network that they were planning to implement to assist self-funded employers reduce medical expenses. And through this process and years of dealing with self-funded employers, the employer concerns have definitely come to our attention. I'm not sure how many of you work with self-funded employers. Do we have any on the webinar that work with self-funded employers? You just say yes.
Everybody's muted, so they could, oh, yes, Yes, I can see people are putting in the chat box that we do have some individuals.
Good, good, because I'm sure they've heard the questions as well. And I would like to hear at the end of the seminar what concerns and questions and mountains they've had to climb to get employers on board with medical tourism. But some of the questions we've heard is, what is my liability when I send a patient abroad? How do we mitigate it? How do we make sure the employee experience is satisfactory? How much money will it save us? Are the outcomes the same as they would be here? Then we also hear facilitators' concerns. Have I made sure that the providers are properly credentialed? How do I help a patient if they have an emergency? They're worried that just one bad outcome could cost them their business. And facilities that receive patients have concerns. Who's going to bear the cost if there's an emergency medical treatment? Will bad press have reputational damage to maybe an entire wing for international patients that they've developed? And then the patients themselves are worried, and helping them understand the options to make sure they've chosen the right benefits and have the solutions to solve a problem can help them understand what happens if something goes wrong. All right, so how many people have I lost? I know insurance is not a fun topic.
No, no, no. We're adding people as you're speaking.
Okay, I'm worried. Hello, hello. Understanding the key issues and being prepared is not as difficult as you think. I often joke that I can clear a cocktail party in 20 seconds talking about insurance. It's not the most exciting topic until you need it. I can tell you I'm very fulfilled in what I do and the remedies that we have given to patients that have just the whole reason I'm in this business is to help people and elevate the safety experience. Today, I'm going to touch on 6 topics. We're going to talk about the misunderstandings about regular travel insurance, what specialty medical tourism insurance covers and what it excludes. We're going to review real life scenarios of claims, talk about other risk management tools available to the patient, the facilitator, and other stakeholders, and talk a little bit throughout about the trends I'm seeing in medical tourism and medical tourism insurance. Yeah, I didn't click that while I was talking. See, my IT skills, amazing. Um, there's several reasons why insurance is important. First of all, I mentioned to you it's going to provide peace of mind to the patient. That peace of mind could make the difference as to whether the patient decides to travel for care or not. It also can give professionalism to the industry and be a differentiator for you as a facilitator or a provider, with having a solution for a problem and including it or getting the options available to the client will make you more professional and really help differentiate you from your competition. It also helps remove the need for legal recourse and mitigates liability. Accident insurance is not a gift from insurers. Usually it's tacked on to a liability policy, and the reason is if you can make a person whole for a damage, you can then reduce their need to pursue legal action. So it does remove the liability exposure. And it provides monetary, look what I did again. And it provides monetary benefits for a complication. Dealing with worst case scenarios, you should really leave to the experts. We have 24/7 assistance service on most medical tourism policies. This is for emergency medical situations. And it's usually not a cost item to the patient or to the facility or the provider. The patient can pay for the coverage themselves. even though we have a lot of partners that build the cost into their services just to keep the liability mitigation to a maximum. So, what is included in medical tourism insurance? There's an accidental death and dismemberment benefit that speaks for itself, and then a repatriation of mortal remains, which covers transporting a possible deceased body back to the home country, which we have had happen, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. It also includes the cost of medical or surgical treatment as the result of a complication. And what if you have a minor complication, but the person's not fit to travel and needs to stay a few extra days, or God forbid, longer? We can include the cost of travel, meals, and accommodations as a result of a complication, not only for the patient, but for the travel companion. There's also a courtesy benefit in there for unsuccessful or unfavorable outcomes if they result from a complication. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. And then there's 24-hour assistance, and then the typical travel coverage has accident and illness insurance in it while traveling. And that could be the slip and fall in the shower, they get hit by the taxi, and that also has a liability element to it. If you're a self-funded employer and you're sending a patient abroad, and God forbid they get hit by the taxi, their family's going to say, "Why did you send my husband to Costa Rica? This wouldn't have happened had you not done that." So every scenario has liability, and people do search for the deep pocket when they're having a tragedy. So having a solution is probably the best way to mitigate, well, is the best way to mitigate that. Insurance is first party coverage accident insurance, which means that the insured is the beneficiary. So the patient actually files the claim and gets reimbursed themselves. They don't have to go to a medical malpractice company, file a claim against the insured. They get to get the benefit directly. And it still reduces the third party's exposure to risk. So that's the beauty of it. It provides them with a way to seek monetary reimbursement and increase satisfaction after a complication. The other point I wanted to mention, and it'll come up again later, is I'll probably say this 5 or 6 times. Regular travel insurance has an exclusion if you're traveling for the purpose of receiving medical care. That is also credit card travel coverage, and most any travel coverage I have seen has that exclusion. Further, once the traveler returns home, they'll have coverage for up to 6 months past their procedure date, which is a continuity of care issue. So we'll go over that a little bit more here on in a minute. There are some misunderstandings about the travel insurance. We discussed that it's for business and leisure travel typically. It does have that exclusion. Medical tourism coverage, however, um, it expands the coverage for the increase in exposure of the insurer, because having somebody have a procedure makes them more at risk. And it's all about the intent and the exposure related to travel. Travel insurance is specialized for a planned procedure and complications thereof. It is not health insurance. It will not pay for the procedure itself. It only pays for the travel exposure and the complications related to an approved procedure. Most patients, of course, choose to self-pay for elective procedures outside of the country, and they will do that for lower costs or access to care. Everybody in the seminar knows that. But have they considered people that use medical tourism to queue jump when they're in socialized medical situations or they're in remote locations. I have a new client, wonderful person that grew up in a remote location and had an injury as a child. And he said he had to be a medical tourist years ago just to have repetitive treatment for care. Those are things you don't necessarily think of. And then when they get home to their remote location, how are they going to have a complication and not have a facility to get to easily? So these are some of the questions that we see. Also, a lot of state funded plans are now starting to see the value of how the cost savings in medical tourism can be applied to their citizens. So they are starting to consider the cost of medical travel with and access to care in state-run insurance plans. And we will occasionally get questions from people who are traveling fully insured to have a procedure done that is covered by a plan. So what are some of the exclusions? I think it's important to discuss those so expectations are met. That's the whole purpose of the seminar. Regular travel insurance is not going to cover you if you're receiving medical care. And medical tourism insurance, as we discussed, does not cover the planned procedure or the related follow-up care. Further, it does not cover pre-existing conditions. So the beauty of that exclusion is twofold. Obviously, we're not going to take on a claim that we weren't intending to take on, but in reality, that exclusion helps the patient because the patient should have been vetted for comorbidity issues before being approved for a procedure. That risk should already be reduced or reconciled prior to having a procedure. That's one reason we don't take on pre-existing conditions. We also do not cover workmanship. I don't like the way my nose looked after my nose job or failed outcomes. I had nasal surgery and I'm still snoring. That is not a covered complication. A complication is considered a separate medical diagnosis as the result of a pre-approved surgery that requires additional medical or surgical treatment that's medically necessary. These travel insurance does also include all the benefits. Medical travel insurance also includes the travel benefits, the slip and fall, the lost luggage, the trip and cancellation and delay. And then many of the benefits are related to a complication. That's the companion coordination, the assistance service, the repatriation benefit, the cost of additional meals, travel, and expenses. So all of those are included and related to a complication. So for our purpose, it's important to note that you can differentiate yourself and reduce exposure and provide the patient with peace of mind. So back to what if something goes wrong? As I mentioned, we have the 24/7 emergency medical assistance with experienced staff operating 24/7 in multiple language to direct a patient in the middle of the night that needs care. They can seek emergency care immediately without filing a claim, but they do need to notify the claims adjuster as soon as prudent because they can do cost mitigation, they can direct the patient to the best facility, and they need pre-approval for revisions as the result of a complication. So as soon as reasonable, contact the claims company in the event of a claim, get pre-approval, and be advised what forms and documents are required to file the claim. Always contact your facility or case manager to make sure that they're aware of the incident and that they can assist you through the process as well. With safety being our number one priority, we get the patient stabilized, we report the incident, we make sure the patient knows what to keep so they can file the claim, they get emergent care immediately, and then the facilitators notified to help them through that process. So I think now's a good time to probably review a couple claim scenarios. This is the real life application. I've kept them kind of brief and generic, even though they were real claims for privacy issues. But let's talk about the first claim that really came to mind when I started putting this presentation together. A mother and daughter went, and the mother was having bariatric surgery, and she had a major embolism, blood clot, and unfortunately passed away while in Mexico. And can you imagine the daughter there with your mom, and you're in a foreign country, and the grief? So I got this call on a Saturday, and we got the assistance service involved. They completely coordinated how to get the mom back, the travel for the daughter. They assisted with the things the daughter needed. A death benefit was paid, all the medical bills were paid, and the additional cost of travel, meals, and accommodation for the daughter. So that's a glowing moment for us, and that would be a glowing moment for you as a facilitator or a provider. Instead of the hospital going, how do we deal with this? And now we've got somebody in the morgue, not to be gruesome, but that's the reality of it. And the facilitator gets the call in the middle of the night. They don't know how to handle that. So that's why these experts are here to help with that. Um, so the coverage was provided. I'm looking through notes. Anyway, it was something that made a very tough situation much more palatable for the daughter. And I still pray for her and hope she's doing okay.
If I can, Tracy,
Please.
just to add regarding your scenario one, international patient departments or facilitators really can't be familiar with these scenarios when a patient passes away in a foreign country, since the rules and regulations are so complex that having an assistance and repatriation service for those rare situations. They're rare, but as you've expressed, they're really horrifying when they happen. They're horrifying for everyone. So having a calm, reassuring backup for these situations is really terrific.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
mean, different countries have different laws about the shipping of deceased, and you need a funeral
Yes.
company. And I mean, I have seen it, and unfortunately, well, in the 12, 13 years we've been doing this, we've had a handful of deaths. So I do want to clarify, this isn't scare tactics either. Like, deaths can happen when you have surgery locally. So let's just be clear about that. There is an elevated risk of some things when you travel, but that's mitigated by the medical care that's provided, and not flying too soon, and moving around, and making sure you're fit to travel before you depart. You'll see some interesting, what I call stupidity claims here in a minute, but let's go on to the next one. Is there anything you want to add to that, Elizabeth?
No, thank you, Tracy.
Um, Early on, we were doing a lot of cosmetic surgery. That is been overshadowed lately by bariatric surgery, probably being the one now, but um, that's also reducing with the introduction of all the medicines for weight loss. So bariatric surgeries are reducing. But we've had situations where a patient got capsular contracture a couple months after the procedure, where scar tissue was so prevalent that it actually involved a surgical remedy. And they would sometimes explant the implant initially, clean it out, allow it to heal. I'm not a medical doctor, this one I'm seeing from claims. And then the patient would be medically sound, which was the end of our liability because re-implanting a breast implant is not medically necessary. We're just trying to get the patient stable and the medical bills that they had unexpected covered. So after a few years, we decided, wow, that's really not fair to the claimant. Like they paid for that procedure and the insurance. Now they're actually in a worse case scenario than they were before. So we did add a failed or unfavorable outcome benefit as a courtesy limit to help towards a revision that would pay for the reimplantation of the implant in this instance after the patient healed enough to have it redone. So as long as a claim occurs or is presented within 6 months of the procedure date, you get an extra 3 months to have the revision. So that gives plenty of time for healing to have the revision and still have that limit for failed or unfavorable outcomes covered. I'm looking at my notes. I talk and then I forget the points I want to say. All right, existing or case scenario number 3, pre-existing conditions. A lot of bariatric patients have hernias and don't know it. And they don't know it until they get into surgery for the bariatric surgery. So we've had many claims presented, I say many, a couple dozen, where the bariatric surgery or surgeon found a hernia during the procedure. And they've tried to put in the expenses for repair of that hernia that the doctor did while he was in there. Here, let me just take care of this while I'm here. Well, a hernia is a pre-existing condition, known or unknown, and as we mentioned, that is not covered. So those costs would be at the expense of the patient. And so those are the types of things you would want to communicate to a patient if you're doing surgeries where things like that could happen. And maybe too, the cost if they find it, so that they know up front what that might cost. So that's not, see, I hit the button again. Look at me. I get so excited. Case scenario 4 and 5. Let's talk about those. This is you really weren't thinking, were you, claim? We had a bariatric patient in the hospital. Nurse came in. What do you have in your mouth? Oh, I'm chewing tobacco. Well, we told you no nicotine or tobacco after surgery. And then found that they delivered a bottle of vodka to their hospital room while they were recovering. So then they were discharged, had a hemorrhage, and it was directly related to the poor aftercare. And so the claim was denied under the failure to follow pre and post-op instructions exclusions. We don't have a ton of exclusions. We have a handful. It was designed that way intentionally. And through the years, we've seen things that had, I guess, outcomes that made us have to add an exclusion. Failure to follow pre and post-op instructions is one of those that we had to add. We had another scenario, still in bandages in Thailand, having cosmetic surgery and breast implants, still bandaged, and gets in the public swimming pool. Of course, that's going to create an infection, and then that was not a good scenario. But again, failure to follow pre and post-op instructions are an excluded provision. Those are really some of the main claim examples that I wanted to present. I know you may have claim questions at the end, so please write them down and we can talk about them. I'll tell you if I've seen them, heard of them, how they were handled, things of that nature. Let's move on to how medical tourism insurance and accident coverage reduces liability and what that liability exposure is. I think I told you earlier that the insured is the owner of the policy, but if they have the loss, they collect the claim payment. They don't have to go through a third party. Also, there's no need for the patient to file a lawsuit. They can just file the claim themselves. And then also the benefit is typically not available to a patient who goes locally for care, but it is available to medical tourists, which actually escalates our standard of care in medical tourism. It adds reputational value, not only to the facilitator, but the provider, and it can reduce receivables. Mhm. So imagine you've got a patient at your facility and they have a procedure, and the procedure has a need for an ICU visit from a bleed, a second surgery, maybe blood transfusions, and the patient is cash pay and they're from out of the country, and now there's a bill at the hospital for this complication. Who's going to pay that? And sometimes the patient will not be allowed to leave the facility until they've settled the bill. I've seen that happen in many places. So this is a differentiator for people, facilities that are providing international care, to have a recourse for the receivables they may have as a result of a complication. And that keeps the patient from having to go into a legal setting, figure out how I'm going to pay. Was that problem mine? Was it the fault of the provider? And I can promise you, if you don't remedy the situation, sometimes it's not the patient that has the problem, it's the family member of the patient that has the problem. So, oh, that was our sole provider, and now we don't have an income, or they're gone, and I need some remedy for that. So I can't. Years ago, we were doing travel insurance, and we would insure doctors that went overseas to provide care for patients. And the biggest exposure we had was the Good Samaritan Act in the hospital, where they would provide maybe rescue a care to somebody that had a heart attack or needed CPR. And then maybe they would get hurt during that process, and then the family would sue the physician for the Good Samaritan Act. So I'm telling you, it comes from everywhere. It's really important to have a solution that makes it easy, that outlines what the expectations are, makes the choice the patient, so they're very clear when they sign up. This is what I signed up for. I opted out of insurance, so I know I don't have any, or I opted in at this limit, and I know that's my maximum limit. That sets the expectations. See, how do I get to the next slide now? There we go. Let's talk about legal action a little bit. I'm not an attorney. I did play one on TV once in my actress days. That was a joke. There is probably there is probably very little, if any, case law on prior medical tourism cross-border legal action. I don't study case law. You want to talk about clearing a cocktail party? That reading case law would put me to sleep. But here are the questions that we think about. What country would a patient file suit in? What if you're the facilitator where the patient lives, but you've sent the patient abroad for care? Who do they have easy access to in a legal setting? That would be the facilitator. So you'll be first on the list. And then if that fails and they have to go after an international provider, if there was an egregious situation, which country's legal system is going to preside? So we have seen things where the long arm of certain states in the US has affected programs for the United Nations, underwriters at Lloyd's, fines, penalties, you would not believe. And you think, how could they do that? I mean, there was a while we wouldn't even insure patients from New York because their legal setting was so difficult. Um, and we have figured that out now, but I'm telling you, you don't know what you're stepping into with the various countries that are involved in the legal precedents. So I always say get good legal advice, find out where you're sending them, um, and just think about how expensive is it going to be to hire an international attorney, and how would a provider's malpractice insurance apply? Some countries, they don't even require providers to have it because it's illegal to sue a provider. So there's a lot of scenarios across a lot of different situations, but having the one option that reimburses the patient without having to navigate that can be very helpful. And it does elevate the standard of care and give the patient peace of mind. I can't say that enough. Providing the solution ahead of time really sets the expectations. So there's ways to set that expectation, and here's where you probably do want to get some legal assistance, and that would be setting up disclosures and informed consents and waivers for the patient responsibility and the exposure for traveling for medical care. I do have some samples of those I've seen over the years, so afterwards, if you want to email me, full disclosure, I'm not an attorney, and you will definitely have to get legal assistance with those forms. Elizabeth knows a lot of people and herself who can assist with that. One of the other things that we suggest are opt-out forms. A lot of facilitators and providers are saying, here's your cost, complication cover is included. You have an option to buy up or an option to opt out. Sign here, and then they know clearly what's going to happen if a complication occurs. And if they've signed an opt out form, that can mitigate a lot of legal action in the case of a complication. It also, again, brings it to the forefront. This is what I have. This is what's going to happen if something goes wrong. Very important to talk to them about that elephant in the room. And don't forget, don't remember like the elephant. Don't forget the family members exposure too, because that having that forum, look, they opted out of coverage, here it is, or they opted in and this is what they got. So keep those on file. I can give you some samples of those as well. And I'm sure Elizabeth has some insight onto those forms. Let's talk about aftercare and continuity of care. A lot of facilitators and international providers say, well, while they're traveling and while they're in our care, I want complication cover. But once they get home, they're on their own. I just need to make sure while they're here, they're covered. Totally understandable. And a lot of times when they come home, emergent care would be covered by their primary insurance. But the product that we offer does offer up to 6 months worth of coverage beyond the procedure date for a complication. I talked to you a little bit about the capsular contracture. Sometimes people have high deductibles and copays that are going to be covered. We would be secondary to any other collectible insurance, but I have seen in Canada where people have queue jumped and they've gone back and had a complication and they cannot get assistance back in Canada. So keep that continuity of care issue in mind. It also, maybe they love their physician where they had the procedure done and they want to travel back to where they had the procedure. So we can pay for that travel back if there's a complication. And one thing is follow-up care is not included in coverage. That should be part of the cost of the procedure. We also do not cover medications related to pain from a procedure, We stay out of that completely unless it is a complication that causes a separate medical diagnosis. It is not the intent of coverage. I think I covered all the points on that slide. I feel I've been talking for an hour. How are we doing on time?
I think, yeah, we have a couple more minutes here, so.
We're
I
at
think.
the very end. We're wrapping it
Yep.
up. I'll be quick. Professional liability, that's a topic all on its own. I'm not going to go into all the details, but managing someone's health care, directing them for care, you have vicarious liability involved with that when you choose a provider for somebody. I would strongly suggest you look into that with a local agent. You have to have a local insurance agent for local coverage that covers you, an entity in a specific territory. If you have questions about that later, I'll be happy to talk with you about it. Also, consider patient privacy issues. We've got the GDPR, we've got HIPAA, we've got Personal Health Information Protection Act in Canada. They're very similar in their requirements, but there is legal liability with regard to that and medical records and transporting them. And there is a remedy for that with data breach coverage that you can also buy locally, and I can help you with some information about that. We had a recent claim where a doctor wouldn't release the medical records, and we were really in a tough situation to adjust the claim. So making sure those records are available, but they're also protected is important. So finally, phew, y'all are so patient. In conclusion, we have specialty travel accident insurance that's meant specifically for the medical tourist. It's a form of risk management for all the reasons I mentioned. Opt-outs and waivers, and get legal assistance in setting those up to set expectations. Professional liability is important. That's the second layer of protection should the accident insurance coverage be penetrated and or non-existent. And then know what your medical providers have, what their medical malpractice insurance is, what are the requirements in that country, and please have a way to deal with patient privacy because those fines can be exorbitant. And whew,
Good job, Tracy.
there's so much to tell and it's hard to tell
There
in a little
is.
time frame, but thank you, Elizabeth.
Oh, thank you, Tracy. I always learn something every time that I talk with you. You always educate me about something else, something that's new, keeping me current with what's happening on this in regards to this very important issue. So we have a number of questions here. And hopefully we'll be able to answer them within our time frame, even though we have about 10 minutes left. I think we can probably stay a few extra minutes if we can address these. So I'm going to start with the short questions first. And it's Yulia asks, patients from what countries can you insure?
That's a good question. We get that a lot. So we truly are an international insurer. We have people traveling all over the world. They go from Australia, New Zealand to Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore. We have people going to India, Canadians to the US, US to Mexico. The only issue would be US or UK sanctioned countries where we couldn't actually make a claim payment because they're sanctioned. So we are truly global.
Great, thank you. So we have a question from Natalie, who is working in Tunisia, a French-speaking country. So her question is it possible to have the documents translated to French? Or it could be any language, or are the insurance documents always in English? And so how would you handle that?
Yeah, thank you. So just so you know, our assistant service speaks multiple language if they have a claim, and they can get translators if it's in a language that's not very prevalent. We work with a lot of facilitators who translate the documents themselves. We can help you with that, but they're all going to have a disclaimer at the bottom because the reinsurance is in Lloyd's, which is a UK domiciled company, that the English version is going to prevail and that the translation was done as a courtesy, and it's close, but the English version prevails, I guess is the long, short answer.
Yes, yes, that's often the way it's done from a legal perspective, is that the English document is the one that's controlling, but you, of course, can have a translation with it.
Thank you. Good to know that, Elizabeth.
My pleasure. I'm glad I can teach you something too, Tracy.
Always.
I think you've answered this question. What time is covered for complication? 3 months after treatment, 6 months. I think you said it's 6 months with the GPS coverage.
Yep, the individual product is, if we're working with groups that have volume and they want to customize benefits, we would certainly then modify that to whatever length they feel appropriate, and that affects the price as well.
There are a couple of questions here about self-funded employers. So this has been a big topic of discussion for many years, at least 15 years, about why self-funded employers have not been more successful in encouraging their employees to travel for quality healthcare services at a cost savings to the employer. So one of the questions is let's see if you can answer these. What kind of self-funded employers are more ready to add medical tourism as part of their employee benefits? Are you able to generalize about that at all, Tracy?
So I've seen employers do it that are regional. We had a very good client that was a group of casinos, which that probably gave it away to anybody who's been in this industry a while. We did have a large employer pre-COVID that was more national in scale, and that seemed to work well. I get questions a lot from self-funded employers that have expats working for them that may want to travel home for care. And that's a little difficult for us to ensure. And mostly they might not need help with that because they have family or something back home. But the larger the scale and the more international, because let's face it, if you go to a large industrial organization with blue collar workers in Tennessee, what percentage of them do you think even have a passport?
Right. Yes,
And
so
I
really
don't mean
good
that
point.
negatively, but why do they have a need to, So that can be a hurdle. I think that international employers are probably some of the better qualified, or at least the multi-regional employers. They seem to work a little bit well. And if you're in that, please contact me because I have some really good solutions for the insurance for the employers as well.
Of course you'd have that. This is a really good question. Can providers insure all their international patients in a group insurance model? I know the answer to that is yes. So please talk about how that works with GPS.
Yes, so I didn't even mention to you, I don't think that Turkey just passed an initiative where, because of the bad press, they're requiring complication cover for medical tourists. So years ago, we started partnering with providers. Thailand was the very first one, a group of hospitals there, where they have international departments that cater to medical tourism. And of course, we can provide them with a customized benefit and solutions. Because of their purchase power, they get discounts, and then they can include the coverage for all their patients that are coming for medical tourism with the little parameters. We have the admin set up for that. So absolutely. Facilitators as well, if they have volume. I have large group facilitators as well.
So those could be, can they be bespoke or custom made products? I mean, you have the standard package, but a hospital group or even a self-funded employer could have some special or specific provisions to address their individual needs or issues.
Exactly. That's why the company is Custom Assurance Placements, because that's what we like to do is provide solutions where there are none. So we can certainly customize benefits.
Great, okay. Um, yes, you have someone who's very interested in talking with you right away. So I will share her information with you,
Aw.
Tracy. There's also a question. You did start talking at the beginning about Blue Cross Blue Shield prompted the creation of GPS. And the question is, why didn't big insurance carriers scale the medical travel network? Is it largely due to complex underwriting, or are there more underlying issues we should be aware of?
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, big question.
Ooh, um, you know, early on in the US, and I can only speak from the US perspective and like the Blue Cross and the United, um, when this started with Blue Cross, they were really a pioneer at that time introducing this to self-funded groups. They did a lot of work developing an international network, contracts. Of course, they had the Blue name behind them, which gave them immediate gravitas. Um, very smart people, very innovative. America was just learning about medical tourism, really. Uh, I mean, even though it's been done in other parts of the world, people were going, "What? You would travel for medical care? We have the best care in the world here. Why would you do that?" I think that they were a little bit ahead of their time, and that created an issue. The timing just wasn't right. I'm so thankful for that, though, because they did come to us and ask us to create a solution. But you'd be surprised if you found an underwriter or a claims representative that knew the policy, there still is built in a provision that you can have care in a foreign country. So I know United has it, Blue has it, but I'm covered by Blue, and I've called him one time and said I need this procedure. I'm going to go have it done in Juarez because it's so much cheaper. And they were like, "We don't know what you're talking about." So I think there's still some education in the US to be done. I wish David Boucher was on this call because he would be a great insight to that. But yeah, a good question. We need to work on that.
Okay, well, let's just squeeze one more in if we can. It's a rather lengthy question, but I think the essence of the question is that um, there is a patient who wants to sue, even though there was coverage they're not satisfied with for whatever reason. And the question is there a separate business umbrella insurance that would protect the facilitator and perhaps the provider, if I understand this question correctly?
Yeah, and I get what they're saying. So we always call it the 1-2 punch. Actually, there can be 1-2-3 with your opt-outs and your waivers, but the accident insurance being the first course of recovery. And then if that is pierced or exhausted, then that's when the liability claim may come in. And it's not really called an umbrella policy, it's called professional liability. And it does cover the vicarious liability of picking a provider that may not have done a good job. But there's so many people involved, like you'd have the professional liability, then the provider would have medical malpractice coverage, and all of those have to be bought where you're domiciled. And there's no way for me to be domiciled in every region of every country. I'd go broke just paying fees. So I can help direct you in that if you reach out to me. I know a little bit about what's available internationally. I do know what's available in the US.
Great. Well, I want to wrap up. We're at time here, and thank you so much, Tracy. You are just a fountain of knowledge about this intricate, often confusing area of medical travel that's really so important for maintaining our professional reputations, for doing the best we can for our clients, for risk management, and for always pushing the standards to do better for people who are traveling internationally for healthcare. So I also want to thank everyone who's joined us today. We will be making a link to the recording available to you. I will pass along your messages that from the chat about people who would like to be contacted right away. I can see lots of people are thanking us, Tracy. It's been my pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for participating.
Well, I just want to add real quickly, Elizabeth, your priority in elevating professionalism in this industry and bringing me to the table to help with that. Thank you very much. Medical tourism training's doing a great job.
Thank you, Tracy. I appreciate it. Yes, let's keep trying to push that rock up the hill and make things better and have a more professional outlook for international health travel.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So nice to see everyone.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.